again. By the way, I'm a little informal chit chatter, you know, so I just waffle on. That's the only reason the team bring me in, is to introduce these things. So anyway, as I said, I'm delighted actually today, you know, as a destination management organisation for Caithness and Sutherland, our role basically is to work with communities, businesses and other key stakeholders to develop and promote responsible and sustainable tourism across the region. So today is really wonderful. We have two excellent speakers and the focus will be community tourism. And I have to say, from our perspective, the absolute power and the future of community tourism. If you were able to attend, it's only probably 2 weeks ago, but I've just come back off holiday, so it feels like a little while ago. We had our face-to-face gathering in Wick. So actually one of our speakers was actually there. I have to say, we had different sections at the gathering. We had capacity attendance, 70 attendees for the venue, but the power of community tourism was really such a positive and impactful session. We also had, as well as Sarah, who's speaking later on, from the Wick Development Trust and the Wick Campsite, we had the John O'Groats Development Trust, and we had the John O'Groats Mill, and also we had various stands as well with aspects of, say, like the Far North Community Rail Partnership and things like that. Lots of different aspects of community tourism. So it's really good to supplement that so soon after the gathering, and I'm sure Sarah might mention some of that when she comes to speak. But first of all, our first speaker, I'm not going to go on because we want to hear from everybody here. Kirsty's smiling because I do usually go on and don't stick to time. But our first speaker today is actually Carron Tobin, who I've worked with on several occasions in various community and different guises. But Carron will tell you a lot more about that. Carron is an executive director of SCOTO. So we're going to start off the session with Carron, around about 20 minutes or so for presentation. Is that right? Thanks very much. Good nod there. And then we're going to follow on with Sarah, who I semi-introduced earlier on. If you haven't met Sarah, she is the project officer for, is that the right title, Sarah?
Yeah, that's what I'm going by at the moment anyway.
You go by it at the moment, yeah. Most of us forget titles, but there you are, you know. But ultimately, she does an amazing job for the Wick Development Trust and their development at the Wick Campsite. So I think, and I know there's people on the call today actually who have amazing things going on in their communities. So especially during the Q&A session, if you're comfortable to speak, then we really welcome any inputs, ideas. This is actually the power of these webinars. It's about sharing good ideas. So without further ado, I will mute myself, Neve, before you do, and we'll let Carron crack on.
Okie doke. Let me get my. Are you all seeing that okay? Oh, everyone's seeing that okay? Great stuff, thumbs up. Right, okay. I've got a very visual presentation for you this morning, so I'm going to go through a number of slides that really help you understand maybe a bit more about what community-led tourism is about, what SCOTO is all about, and also some of the things that are happening across Scotland that hopefully are inspiration for all of you. So get the slides to move forward. What am I doing wrong? No. Sorry, folks, they're not. There we go. Okay, so just to put this in its strategic context, we've got Scotland Outlook 2030, which is the national strategy for tourism, and very much with this responsible tourism for a sustainable future as the ambition behind the strategy. And the word community appears throughout that document, which was launched back in 2020, and it's become more and more significant through time, partly because lockdown put quite a focus on community for many reasons, but that's very much strategic context, but we also have NSET, the National Strategy for Economic Transformation, which is promoting a wellbeing economy, a culture of delivery, entrepreneurship, community wealth building, and community-led tourism really sits very, very comfortably within that, where it's very much about grassroots up. So just to give a wee bit of context, the Communities Leading in Tourism was a programme that Highlands and Islands Enterprise ran. It started just before lockdown and then went online during lockdown. 85 people across Scotland took part in the 12-week programme, and from it came this idea of the peer-to-peer learning had been so valuable that funding was sourced to look at setting up a network, and that's basically where SCOTO comes from. So we were set up, we're approaching our second birthday. We were launched on the 25th of April 2 years ago and became a KIC just earlier this year. Our board members are from all across Scotland, and we've got over 300 networkers as part of SCOTO. So we are the network of community tourism operators across Scotland, and we've got two websites, scoto.co.uk, which is for the network, and belocal.scot, which is very much visitor facing. But the obvious question to ask is, what is community-led tourism? And it means different things to different people, but for us, it's where a visitor-facing service, facility or experience is delivered by the host community, and it can be via a social enterprise model or something similar, but the principle is it's not for profit and it delivers social environmental benefits back into the community. And an important thing is it's not always 100% of what's on offer. It may be a community service or facility which does also appeal to visitors, and equally tourism might not be the primary driver as to why they're doing it, but it's a way for visitors to enjoy being in the community and enhance their experience, and also where their interaction will support what the community is all about. So that's the definition. I'll come back to that though, because there's other sides to it. Another thing that we're keen to stress is community tourism is not new. There's been a lot of heritage societies that are a classic example where they run visitor centres, museums, and they've been doing it for a century. And here Stromness is a very good example where that museum's been run by the community from the outset in different locations, but community tourism isn't new. Here's an example that I would imagine a number of you will know of. This is the Loch Ness Hub at Drumnadrochit, which that's Russell, who's our chair. They took over what was the Visit Scotland Information Centre and also the toilets, which were run by Highland Council, and they run it as a community benefit society. They run a travel business as part of the venture, and they did pay their first dividend back round about Christmas this year. So they're an excellent example of where community-led tourism is commercially, it's actually delivering returns from an economic point of view. But another example, which I'm involved with, is the Calendar Youth Project, who run the Calendar Hostel in 4 Pods. Back to my point about tourism isn't always the main driver. We do this because we want to give young people training and hospitality experience. So yes, we're there as a tourism visitor service, but we've got 4 modern apprenticeships underway at any time, training young people in hospitality and then enabling them to get jobs in the local community and stay in the local community. Another good example that some of you may be familiar with is down in Findhorn. Just after lockdown, they were experiencing massive issues with camper vans, and they got funding to put in a motorhome air, which has got over 20 points at it, and they take money from the air. You've got to leave each day. It's a motorhome air, so you can only stay overnight. You can't stay for a fortnight. But the money they've raised from that is allowing them to build footpaths and do all sorts of other improvements in their area. Then moving on, this is down in Whithorn, right at the south, down in Dumfries and Galloway, where the Whithorn Way was launched. And one thing that the Whithorn themselves realised is they didn't have any one-night budget accommodation in their own community when people completed the way. So when they got funding to refurbish their town hall, they got additional funding to build a bunkhouse at the back of it. And they found that, yes, that works for the Whithorn Trail, but it also actually allows them to do a whole load of events where they can offer accommodation as well. And another example that you're going to hear more about shortly is the Wick Campsite, so I'm not going to say any more about that one. So our vision is for every community to have the opportunity to get involved in community-led tourism and for it to be a mechanism for their community to be an even better place to live, work and visit. Our mission is about building the skills, connections and confidence of everyone involved, and our ambition is really to recalibrate tourism in Scotland to deliver for our communities. And the environment first and visitors second. We do 7 different things. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but just give you a flavour of them. So last year we did a roadshow across Scotland, 27 different venues. So that was us out and about talking to people, finding out what's important to them and explaining a bit more about what community tourism is all about. We hold annual gatherings. This was us in Kingussie last year and we were down in Dumfries this year. And actually people from Wales and Ireland joining us, keen to know what we're doing in Scotland because they recognise the benefit of it. We've got our SCOTO.co.uk website, which has got all sorts of resources on it and about our gatherings. We have monthly gatherings online, and also resources about toilets and churches are noted there, and I'll come back to that because we talk about toilets and churches a lot. BeLocal.scot is our visitor-facing website, and our kind of positioning is encouraging visitors to see themselves as temporary locals, to actually slow down and understand what's important to the community and really get involved and help support them in what they're trying to do. That website has got blogs, it's got an interactive map and lots of tips for visitors. The map actually maps out places across Scotland, and this is work in progress at the moment, but communities are working across the visitor economy under all 8 different categories there, and we've got over 100 entries on the map at the moment, but we did an audit in Ayrshire recently and there's over 100 community tourism operators in Ayrshire alone, so we know that this map has got a lot more scope and are keen to engage with any of you who are involved and would like to be part of the network, part of the map. We've also been doing blogs. We get funding to appoint Robin McKelvey, who I'm sure many of you have heard of. He's a Scottish travel writer, and he's been writing blogs for different community tourism enterprises across Scotland. And one of the reasons we've got Robin doing that is often communities aren't aware just how interested visitors are in what they're doing, why they're doing it, all that side of things. And this is a way of helping communities tell their story in a visitor-facing way. And make it much more, realistic in the visitor's mind. So just to go back to our website, I said earlier that we talk about toilets and churches a lot. So I just wanted to tell you a bit more about what's going on, which you will be familiar with, but maybe give you some inspiration from across Scotland as to other examples of what's happening, and also maybe during the Q&A hear what's happening in your area. But there's 800 churches either being closed or have been closed by the Church of Scotland and others, and being put on the market. And there are actually already examples of where churches have already been repurposed for a community and visitor-facing use. And this is in Ullapool, where the old church is the museum. So there's one example, and it has been for some time. Another example is in Braemar, where St Margaret's, which is a wonderful architectural Grade A listed building. It's actually a venue. It's operated as a venue with various exhibitions, recitals, concerts, all sorts of things take place. So there's another example where a church has been repurposed, and their event programme is quite significant, where people travel to the area for the event programme. So 2 examples. And also, I don't know if any of you have heard of champing. This is actually something that's happening down in England and Wales, and people pay £69 a night. They've actually got a fixed fee to actually camp in a church, and these can be places of worship as well as buildings that are no longer used for worship. But the idea is that they set up camp beds in the church and people stay overnight and can sometimes it's to stay in a famous building because of the architecture or whatever. Sometimes it's just that is the only place that you can stay. But it's just an example of what your imagination can do when you start looking at the possibilities. So moving on, public toilets being closed. We're aware of that happening in many places, and it's such an important part of a visitor experience. Sorry, this isn't moving on. So toilets are being closed, and it's different across Scotland, where some councils are keeping them open, some councils are closing them, and some are looking at partnerships with communities and businesses. But just to give you the example again of the Loch Ness Hub, this is where Russell and his team run the toilets, but actually with the footfall they've got there and the donation scheme they've got, they make actually quite a bit of money out of the toilets that helps subsidise some of the other things they do. But that's where they've got the footfall. They've used all the digital stuff now, where people find it much easier to use QR codes and online payment. You don't actually have to have a 50p coin or a £1 coin in your pocket. These are two examples down in North Ayrshire, where on Arran and Cumbria, the community have reached a partnership with the council where they run the toilets using local volunteers, but they've managed to get money to refurbish the toilets as well. And a big thing is putting in changing places, disabled toilets. And here's an example in Angus, where it's a toilet that's next to a beach and next to what can be described as a dormitory village, where they've taken over the toilets, more because they didn't want antisocial behaviour. The toilets attract the family market, and if they were to close, the fear was that they would get a different market there. So they took them over, but they actually display their artwork in the toilets, and they've got wonderful interpretation all around the building about what people can see on the beach. So there's just another example of, they're not doing that to make money, they're doing that to keep the right kind of market, so to speak, in their area. And this is a more topical one. You'll all be aware that Visit Scotland have announced just a few weeks ago that they're going to close all the remaining visitor centres by 2026. So they closed several many years ago before lockdown, and this is just the remaining ones that are all going to be closed because they are moving to their digital first strategy. But I think it's important to recognise this happened, there's been phases of this, and Loch Ness Hub is where the community took over what Visit Scotland operated. And provide all sorts of services, not just the visitor information, and that's where it becomes viable, where the information is part of a bigger service. Down in Callander, where I live, we took over what was the remainder of the lease of the information centre, and then when the lease terminated, moved and bought the local bank using community resources, and now run the VIC in the bank across the road. But we've got a self-catering flat upstairs that was converted and is now bringing in significant money, which makes the VIC viable. Butha Barra on the Isle of Barra is an excellent example, where they have their community shop, but they also provide information at the community shop. And I think an important thing is their opening hours are actually tied into the ferry service, and if the ferry is delayed for any reason, they adjust their opening hours to suit, because they see that welcome for visitors, that face-to-face welcome, is one of the most important parts of what they do. And that's not something Visit Scotland would do. And then just more close to home for all of you, in Brora, at the Otter's Couch, which is an arts and crafts social enterprise, the visitor information point is in that building. So it's where introducing the information into a service that already exists and actually is much more viable, rather than trying to do it independently. So just to share a wee bit more with you, I'm conscious of time, but when we did our roadshow, one of the comments that was made time and time again was that tourism feels like it just happens to us. And this was, communities that they're doing a lot themselves, but actually they'd like to be more involved in how tourism plays out in their community. And I gave you the definition earlier of community-led tourism being where a visitor service and experience is offered, but there's another side to this where the community is actually more involved in the development, management and promotion of their community as a destination. So I'm just going to quickly touch on something that I hope a number of you are already aware of, but we were approached by the North Highland Initiative to look at community-led tourism in the North Coast 500 and develop a partnership together. And this is where we developed Press Pause as a programme, as an initiative to roll out in individual communities, and we piloted it in Thurso and Loch Carron. So just to say a bit more about what it's about, it is about taking that community-led approach of looking at what is important to the community, and it's about bringing business and community interests together at the same table. And it's exploring this idea of press pause being that we're in a new era in tourism. We're post-COVID, we're post-Brexit, we've got a climate emergency, we've got artificial intelligence scaring most of us as to just what it can actually do. But also we have got a strategic context that is suggesting we should be doing things differently with a wellbeing economy and a responsible tourism approach. And meanwhile, all our communities are being empowered to do more for themselves, to own assets and strengthen their voice. So that was the context. And what it's really about is having conversations in the community, as I say, with business and community interests together. Businesses are part of the community. I think that's something that often isn't recognised. And look at what's working, what's not working, who are the main competitors, who are good comparators of what you'd like to be doing, what's the visitor profile, past, present and future. The two things that we focus a lot of time on is destination competency, just, where are you in terms of your competency at being a destination? And we look at 16 different factors. Place branding, which is really looking at what your place is all about, and we look at unique selling points, USPs, POPs, which is points of parity, and pods, which is points of differentiation, that then help define new visitor propositions that actually are built in why the community is what it is today. And also looking at recalibrating what we measure. So just to share very briefly, the press pause, the destination competency appraisal uses the classic traffic lights of red, amber and green, and looking at 16 different criteria and appraising as to whether red is basically where it's not working, amber or it doesn't exist, amber is where it could be improved, and green is where things are functioning well. So going through 16 different criteria and then appraising, and this is just from Carron and Thurso, just a snapshot of what we looked at there under some of the criteria, hopefully giving a feel for what's involved. But the place branding, it also looks at the fact that visitors are influenced by so many external sources at the moment, and it starts with Visit Scotland and the DMOs, but the travel trade, TV, books and websites, online travel agents, bloggers, friends and family, and how often is the local and the host community's voice heard as part of that marketing promotion? And this is about helping communities really think about how they want to be portrayed as a visitor destination. And also just two examples from other parts of Scotland. It's important to look at how other people are portraying you at the moment, because Campbelltown, the Lonely Planet, doesn't give it a very good run for its money, and Drumnadrochit, from the Rough Guide's point of view, that's how they're being viewed externally. And what can you do to influence that? And a key part of that is Visit Scotland. They want content from local communities to supplement what they have. And this is what they currently use to describe Loch Carron. And to my mind, that could be any community in the coast of Scotland. I was going to say the West Coast, it could be any coastal community. It's not telling you anything about Loch Carron, it's just telling you it's a good base to go and do other things. So it's this idea of understanding how you're portrayed at the moment and using that as a real catalyst to actually think about your own positioning. And as I say, we look at unique selling points, what's unique about the community that nowhere else can claim, points of differentiation, what sets you apart, and points of parity, which means you've got a reason to be on the tourism map and work as part of the overall destination, which is Venture North in this case. The other thing that we are spending a bit of time on is looking at measuring success in tourism. At the moment, it's done nationally in terms of footfall, bed nights and spend, but actually we are really keen that people think a lot more about what matters to your community. And with a lot of communities involved in place planning, community action planning, if you've identified young people, retaining young people as a real theme in your community, then measure that. How much is tourism doing to keep young people in the community? And I use the calendar youth hostel as an example of that, where that is what that is all about. And the number of people staying the night and whatnot isn't as important as the number of young people who are retained in the community. So just this thought of recalibrating how we measure tourism. Early days, but I think there's a lot in it with the government focus on place branding, place standard and place planning. So just to share with you the communities who've been involved with Press Pause, it's we're doing it across Scotland now, but Thurso took part from your own point of view, and Brora, Sarah's here, and we're just finishing the work we're doing with Brora. We've got Applecross and Plockton and Loch Carron coming on board, and hopefully other parts. But that's where the North Island Initiative are our partner on that and funding it. But hopefully you can see there it's happening in other parts of Scotland as well, and is really gathering momentum. So that's me run through all my slides, and really I'll just hand over to Sarah now, who's in the photo here, who's going to talk about the Wick campsite. So I'll stop sharing and hand over to Sarah.
Thanks, Carron. That was really insightful. I didn't know, I knew I could go glamping, but I didn't know I could go champing. So now that's a new thing on me. So yes, I'll just run through where we're at with Wick Development Trust and our takeover of the Wick River Campsite. You'll have to bear with me with the slides here. So Wick Development Trust was set up in October 2019. So it was set up with a long-term goal to support and enable the regeneration of the town of Wick. So at that point, there was a lot of talk from a Sustrans partnership with Highland Council to do a major development work in the town centre. All that work is still going on in the background, but obviously October 2019 wasn't the most ideal time to start a trust, given the unforeseen pandemic that happened 5 months later. So the early projects for the trust was to really see what we could do with town centre regeneration. So at that time, the town centre, the high street, was kind of bookended by these 2 derelict buildings. So that was the first project, was to take over the ownership of those. The buildings got demolished. One site has since been sold for redevelopment to a local business, and the other site is still an asset with the trust. So in these exercises, it became clear that the trust needed to find a way to be sustainable themselves. So the funding landscape is changing all the time, but it is incredibly difficult now for trusts to be able to be sustainable and have those core costs covered, and to be able to generate income that then becomes match funding to bigger projects. So the lease for the Wick campsite came available back in April 2022. And the trust saw that as an ideal opportunity then to have a commercial arm that would then future-proof the trust activities. So this is an aerial view of the campsite. So it's a 90 pitch site. It's been operating in Wick for over 40 years. It is a Highland Council owned site, and the council themselves ran it for a number of years before it was leased to a private business who had run it for the last 18 years. So when they retired, the lease became available. So the location of the campsite is ideal for the trust in terms of the town centre regeneration as well. So we're just, less than a 10-minute walk to the town centre. We've got a lovely core path along the riverside that takes you there. So it's in an ideal location for the trust to be able to take ownership there and be able to be a filter from the visitors that are coming to stay with us at the campsite, and know that we can direct them to all the various shops, restaurants, pubs in town, so that they can benefit from that footfall. But the riverside itself is a wee bit of a hub of activity. We've got the nice core path that loops around, so it's a popular area for dog walkers. Over on the north side, this green in the summertime is where the summer fair and amusements are, and the field up from that is where we have the county show. So there's a lot of buzz around the riverside in general. We also have the swing park here. And we've got the local fountain as well, and monuments. So it is a very nice scenic area, and it's very much tucked away as well. So you're not going to see it by the roadside. You would really need to be either going to the campsite or taking a stroll along the river to be able to find it. And so the area itself as well has a number of local community groups involved. So this is just one example. This has been looked after by the local Wick Community Council. They've reinstated the fountain here. I think it's over 100 years old. We've also, Wick Development Trust have been working with the local schools for tree planting initiative. So funded by the Nature Restoration Fund, we've planted over 350 native trees around the riverside. Here's just a picture of the kids enjoying themselves on that day out. And this is from last week, actually. The trust held a wee Easter egg hunt for the local kids in the swing park just next to the campsite. So there's a lot going on in the general area and several community groups involved in its upkeep. So when the lease became available, the trust came up with a 3-phase business plan. This was because the site had been lacking investment over recent years. So not only did we want to take over the asset, we wanted to improve it. So the phase 1, well, I'll just work through the phases just now. So phase 1 was to just do general improvements across the site. So we started off with new entrance fencing that just improves the overall look of the site and the security. We've doubled the electric hookup on site. So we now have 66 electric hookups, and that's just addressing the new demand really from these larger campers. Most people are now looking for electric for all their various gadgets they have on board. And we also revised the internal layout as well. So initially it was just the figure of 8, and now we have these branching arms to just improve the access across site and to keep people off the grass, to maintain that in tip-top condition throughout the season. And we put in 12 additional hard standing pitches across the site as well. That's just to accommodate the larger vehicles that we're seeing on the road these days. And we also installed a small play park area as well, just to keep that family-friendly theme going on. And we also have a nice new communal barbecue area. So this one just sits beside reception, which I think the wardens are quite happy with, so they get fed now and again when everyone's having a barbecue around there. And we also, as part of phase 1, did a toilet block refresh. So there we got the floors painted and new vinyl covers on the door, but we knew that there really wasn't much we could do with the building itself. So it is very much in need of replacement. So this building was originally just 2 steel porta cabins kind of bolted together, and it definitely seen its time. It has probably been over 30 years old that they've been on site. So the feedback from the visitors on site was always really positive about everything, really, that they got a friendly welcome, that the wardens were great, the site location was perfect. But if we did get any negative feedback, it really was geared towards the facilities on site and just being updated. So phase 2, which we're currently in at the moment, is to build this new toilet block on site. So this, we started with plans on this for this time last year in April. So we went through the planning permission stages, the building warrant stage, and we got the funding secured to start the project in November. Unfortunately, we did have a wee bit of a stall with planning permission, but we ended up having everything in place to start the build there in January. So this is the internal layout of the building. We have a male block and a female block. And we also have accessible shower room and accessible toilet room, along with a family shower room. And we have a wash-up area and laundry room there, and then the plant room at the back for all the services. So accessibility is key there, because previously we weren't able to offer anything on that side of things. So to be able to have a fully accessible building is going to be brilliant for us to promote that. The building has also been designed with net zero ambitions at the forefront. So you'll see from the graphics there that we have a 51 panel in-roof PV array. We expect that this will generate around 80% of the energy use on site. And we also have the battery storage backup so that we can make the most of it when the sun shines. It would also be serviced by air source heat pump technology. So this is quite unique for this type of building, as the hot water demand is going to really peak in the mornings and the evenings. So we have had a bespoke heating system created for us. So the air source heat pump will then heat through the underfloor heating throughout the building. And we also have the mechanical ventilation heat recovery system as well. So that will take care of the heating and cooling of the building as well. So all these renewable technology and equipment will help us reduce our energy bills, and also help us work towards net zero for the campsite. So that's going ahead of me there. So this is where we started back in January. We've had a few weather delays, but in general, things are running on track. It was impressive to see how quickly the building went up itself. We got the timber kit delivered on the 12th of February. So we have been making very good progress over the last couple of months. We're glad to say that the scaffolding is now down, and we will be in a position for the building to be open towards the middle of June, we're thinking at the moment. Sorry. So this is what the building looks like as of yesterday, which I suppose isn't ideal if we're opening a week Monday, but this building, well, we'll have temporary facilities in, to service the visitors as they arrive on a week Monday. So to fund this project, we've had a kind of multi-funded package here. So we have 7 main funders: the High Green Grant Fund, the Highland Community Regeneration Fund, the Dounreay Socio-Economic Fund, and the Scottish Government Cares Fund, SSE, RWE Campster Wind Farm Community Fund, the Tannakin District Wind Farm Trust Fund. So if anyone has any questions on those funds, I would quite happy to take them under the question answer session. And phase 3 here is the reception building. So we're aware that it's functional in that it has the space for a counter for people to check in, and we have a small workshop space, but in reality it's not really meeting the visitor expectations. So our next phase is to have a new reception building that will have a communal area with an indoor-outdoor area where guests can come and hang out and just create a more relaxed feeling around the campsite. So the campsite itself is central to our local tourist economy. At the beginning of the season last year, we did a questionnaire just to let us gauge how much people were spending in the area when they stayed at the campsite. So the survey allowed us to estimate that visitor expenditure per booking was around about £138. So if we extrapolate that up to the number of bookings that we had last season, we estimated that those staying at the campsite contributed over 750,000 to the local economy. We did have a comment at the Venture North conference that figure was maybe misleading, that, you know, that 750,000 could just be to, you know, petrol stations and Tesco. So we don't believe that to be true. We know that we're guiding people into the town centre, and whether they're having, you know, lunch at Morag's or dinner in the Mackay's, that's something that we're really, really working hard on, is to channel those people into the town centre and see what Wick has to offer. And as I said before, we're in the ideal location for it as well, just being 10-minute stroll along the riverside. And so the campsite itself is run as a not-for-profit community enterprise. So this is really to future-proof the Trust's activities, that we're not reliant just continually applying to public funds to allow the Trust to sustain. But also all profit will go back into town centre regeneration and community projects. So we're aware that we don't want this to just be a sound bite, you know, that all profit is going back to the town centre. So over the next 3 to 6 months, we will be working with the local community to come up with an action plan that will identify local projects that then the campsite will be able to make happen and support and match fund. The campsite is also a local employer, so there is 1 full-time warden on site and then 3 seasonal wardens. And there's also the just general boost to the footfall with the wider economic benefits, as we mentioned. And this is just a wee video to just run through the campsite so you can see what the general look of it is. But we had a very successful season last year. We had over 12,500 people through the gate. So we were really delighted with that. That kind of exceeded all our expectations, really. So we're hoping now with these new facilities on site, with the completion of the new toilet block, and now what we're able to offer visitors will make a big difference on our visitor numbers. And when Carron said as well about having the Press Pause initiative, there's just so much more we can do in terms of supporting community tourism. So another piece of work that we're wanting to do is to create this Visit Wick website so that we can just promote everything in the town and get more people on board with the concept of community tourism, that, you know, we ourselves can be the driver of that. And I really like the word that Carron used, is recalibrate the tourism industry. So we're hoping that the local community can help us along that way.
Thank you very much, both. Is that you finished there, Sarah?
Yeah, I've had a bit. I'm not sure how to get you back.
To stop sharing. I'll ask somebody else. Yeah. I can't do tech.
There we go. But sorry, it all went a bit dark on me there. I couldn't really see the slides as I was going through them, so thanks for bearing with me there.
But welcome to the kind of presentations I normally give, Sarah, because I never see my slides, so I just hope that my memory will actually kick in. So thank you both, actually. There's so much to take on, actually, from what you said, but I'm going to go back to I think Carron said it as well. It's important. I think it's very important in our area, especially in our remote and rural part of Scotland, that we often talk about businesses and communities as separate entities, but actually,